Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association. My name is Kate Wamsteker and today I'll be your moderator. Please note that you've been placed on mute for the duration of this webinar. You may participate throughout the webinar and ask questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar using the Ask Question function in your GoToWebinar dashboard. Hosting today's webinar is Carrie Corderillo. Carrie is an experienced instructor and sales coach. She has spent over 20 years working in B2B sales and sales leadership roles. Carrie has led large-scale development initiatives to transform sales cultures, which have improved customer experience and sales achievement. Her previous experience includes management training, organizational development, product management, and human capital management consulting. Carrie holds a Master of Adult Education and also maintains her Ontario Certified Teaching designation. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Carrie to get started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Kate, for that intro. So excited to be talking about this topic specifically with you all today. Consultative selling really, for me, is at the core of everything we do to be an effective sales representative. And it really is so fundamental to our success. Being able to have a dialogue with a client, being able to investigate what's going on within their organization, and then being able to offer solutions, products, services, capabilities that are going to help them get to where they want to go, to their desired state. That's a lot of fun stuff. That's why we do what we do, is when we can bring all of that together for the customer. So that's what we're going to be focused on today, is really what is the consultative selling approach that will be most effective, and what are the 8 steps that we can go through to get us to that level of success. So in terms of where our focus is, we'll go through our understanding of what consultative selling is all about. We'll go through the 8 steps of that process and talk about how you apply that to a really good first call or first meeting. So remember that this session is aligned to the CPSA Institute Competency Framework. And by participating in this session, you will receive credit hours towards your certified designations that you're working towards. So really excited to talk to you today, hoping that this is going to be a very beneficial session for you. And just so you know, we typically go through this content in a much more in-depth way in the classroom when we are presenting this. So we're doing a little bit of a lightning round today on this call. So I'll go through each of the 8 steps. We may not do a real deep dive in each of them, but I want to make sure you get a good understanding of what do we mean by consultative selling and how do you consultatively sell effectively with your client. And that's a really important distinction. When I think of sales and effective sales and being a successful salesperson, it really does come down to how we approach our time in front of the customer. Sales at the heart of it is something that we should be doing with the customer. It's not something that we're doing to the customer. So this process really does highlight that difference, that this is collaborative. It is in not just collaboration, but this is in consultation with the client as we go through this process to learn more about their needs and then hopefully be able to provide them with a solution that's going to meet those needs. So when we think of what are the consultative selling principles, and by the way, whatever you call it, I mean, consultative selling, value-based selling, needs-based selling, solution selling, ROI selling, all of those terms really do encapsulate sort of the heart of what we're talking about here. And they've been called different things over the years based on the methodology or the model that you're focused on. But really at the core, it really is all about how are we taking that consultative selling approach? Are we truly connecting to the client? Do we understand where they are today, where they want to be, and what's getting in the way? For me, that is consultative selling. What's their current state, what's their desired state, and what's the gap? And being able to explore that with a client will help us to determine whether or not we can align to help them solve their issues or solve their problems. So when you think of consultative selling principles, it really is all about investigate, right? It's ask and don't tell. So we're asking a lot of questions. We're prepping really good questions to bring to the client. And we're investigating. We're really becoming students of their business. We need to have a good understanding of their industry. We need to prep really well before we spend time in front of the client. so that we can come with good, insightful questions to better understand what's going on for them. It means leveraging intel and information that we have about their business, using something called the client objectives map, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in our session. It means really focusing in on what is the return on investment? How are they going to get benefit or value out of the solution or service that we can provide them with? It's about developing a very comprehensive business case with the client and really focusing in on the unique value proposition. What is unique about what we can offer that differentiates us from the competition, that will provide business value for the client that's in front of us? And we all have tools and sell sheets and product decks from marketing and from other parts of our organization that helps us as a first step to define our unique value proposition. But the next step is making it very specific to the client that you're speaking with, because their situation may be slightly different. Their needs may be slightly different. What's important for them as a stakeholder in terms of the problem they're looking to solve may be slightly different. So that unique value proposition should be tailored to the client that's in front of you. And those are all very fundamental principles of taking that sort of consultative selling approach and really being able to focus in on the client and what's important to them now. And I did say that as we go through the 8 steps, remember preparation is key. So we never want to waste time in front of the client. One, we definitely don't want to waste their time, but frankly, I don't want you to waste your time either. So it's really important that we prep well. And that preparation may be doing research on their industry, their business, going onto LinkedIn, figuring out who the stakeholders are within the business, where they've come from, what their background is, maybe mapping out those stakeholders and who you want to go and speak with, as well as prepping questions, issues that you think may come up during your conversations with the client, so that you can be very prepared as you go into those meetings. So that's going to be really key moving forward. So let's go through the steps. And as I go through these, I will pause at certain points that we can get some feedback from you. But let's really talk about how to go through these steps effectively. So the very first step in the consultative selling approach is greeting and building rapport. Often we do this intuitively as sales reps. Many of us have entered the field of sales because we're really good at talking to people. And we're very good at relating to others, and we're really good at building relationships. But we don't often sort of take a step back and really think about, how do we do this well? And is there a way that we can enhance our effectiveness in building rapport with clients, especially if this is a new prospect that we're just starting to get to know? So what can we do to enable ourselves to better build rapport as we meet with new prospects and as we continue to build relationships with clients? So there's a few things that we can focus on. First and foremost, definitely projecting honesty is key, right? We want to build a trusting relationship with our customers, and it's critical that they recognize our honest intentions. And it's one thing to be honest in conversation, but it's making sure that the customer perceives this honesty is something entirely different, right? So we want to be open, we want to be honest, and we want to make sure that that is getting projected to the client. And I often start many sales conversations with something a little like this, right? Like, we've been able to help other organizations like yours deal with a similar problem. I don't know if we can support you, but love to figure that out and work with you on that. So for me, and again, this is just my approach, that component of honesty is kind of dovetailed with a little bit of humility, right? That we are investigating whether or not we can help the client. And until we actually have that dialogue, that discussion, I don't know if I can help them. So I actually say it because I think that's an important part of projecting honesty, is including a little bit of humility and saying, hey, this is what we're going to discover together. And with that comes confidence. So you'll notice in that little 10-second intro, I actually said, here's how we've helped others. And maybe you're expanding a little bit on this. So you are demonstrating competence by establishing yourself either as an expert or an authority in a given area. You're talking about ways that you've helped other organizations. So they do understand that I'm not just here to ask you questions, but I've actually done this before. I'm good at it. We know what we're doing, but we want to explore with you, right, to see where that lies and where that fits. So that's the competence piece. And of course, you want to show propriety, right? Propriety is all about making sure you are, behaving appropriately. You're, behaving according to certain accepted social norms. Things like arriving on time, dressing appropriately for who you're meeting with. And you notice I don't say dressing, for a business meeting, because I think across a lot of industries now, what is appropriate in terms of dress has fundamentally changed. So it really is about knowing your client, knowing the industry, and determining what's going to be that best fit. And so making sure, again, showing up on time, dressing based on who you're meeting with, being prepared. All of those things are ways that we can show propriety. That we have, established, that we are sort of meeting and adhering to sort of those established norms. And then lastly, which is, again, I think something intuitively that we do in sales, but something that is very helpful to call out and figure out if we can do that better, is establishing commonality. And we often do this, right? We look for ways that we can understand, things that we have in common with the client. So understanding where we may have commonality. And that may be things from a personal perspective. In conversation, you may uncover, information about what they did on the weekend, or, the old sales trick of looking around their office and seeing what pictures are on the wall or what's posted, talking about family, current events, talking about, sports that they're engaged in that we may have in common. So, it's really important to establish commonality. What I have found though, and again, this may be a little bit of fundamental change in the last couple of years, is I often see reps not necessarily going to sort of those personal things, but actually looking for business commonality. So, do we have a similar culture? Do we have a similar way of approaching our clients? That may be a commonality. Are we, are our clients and us, do we attend the same trade shows? Are we involved in some of the same industry groups? That may be another way to establish commonality. Do we give to the same charities? Are we all part of United Way? So what would that look like? So look at us, how do you establish that commonality? How do you find out those things in common? Not just from a personal perspective, but also from a business one, is a great way to build rapport. So think about how you're doing that as you walk in the door. How are you projecting honesty? How are you demonstrating competence? How are you showing propriety? And how are you establishing commonality in those first few minutes of the conversation with the client? And to highlight, one of the other ways to really focus in on commonality is to look at who is it that you're speaking with, and what is their personality style, and how does that influence the way they're communicating with you. And it's about meeting them where they are, not changing who you are, not changing your personality style, but by recognizing whether or not you've got a driver in front of you who, driver might be fast moving, logical thinker. They may want to get to the point right away, speak really quickly, talk about outcomes, and really focus in on driving the agenda. Can you meet them where they are and meet their energy? You may have someone who's analytical, who requires more time to study, needs more facts and figures. Is a little bit more methodological in their approach. Can you meet them there? Can you provide data? Can you give them time to think things through? Can you focus the meeting in a way that's going to appeal to that personality style? You may have someone in the room that you're meeting with that isn't expressive, right? Someone who, again, is sort of on the faster side, focus more on telling, but maybe more thinking through what is the emotional connection, or how is this going to impact my people, right? So can we appeal to that? Can we talk about how do we bring people together in this decision? How do we make sure we've got alignment with their internal teams, and really focus on that in the meeting? And then from an amiable perspective, someone who may be a little bit more methodical in their approach, because they really do want to ensure alignment, and they want to make sure that this is a decision that's made by the broader team. So again, when we're meeting with them, are we meeting their needs? Are we asking them questions about who else in the team needs to be involved in these discussions? How do we ensure alignment? How do we engage the broader team as we move through the sales process? So commonality, absolutely talk about the personal stuff, maybe focus in on some of the business things that you have in common, but also pick up on their communication style and the cues that they're sending you so that you can really ensure you're focusing in on asking questions and managing the meeting in a way that's going to appeal the most to them. So there is a lot more personality styles, and I believe you've got some handouts available to you to give you some more detail in this. So that's all about establishing rapport. Step 2 is about establishing context. So this is about making sure that you and the client are on the same page. Have you provided the background, the rationale for the meeting? You perhaps have already given them your unique value proposition, or else you wouldn't have had the meeting in the first place. But are you restating that? Have you really emphasized what's in it for the client to meet with you today? And really focus in on, locking arms with the client and moving forward with them. Establishing context is actually a really critical part of the sales process that we sometimes forget to do, because it does set the stage for the meeting. It gives us some parameters around what the discussion will be, and it helps us to focus our agenda and focus the conversation. One of the ways that I like to ensure that we've got focus in a meeting is actually to send out an agenda ahead of time. And the way that I've structured my agendas is by looking at it from these 3 perspectives. So not just a list of the stuff we're going to talk about, but purpose. What's the purpose of the meeting? And do we have buy-in from the client that we both are in agreement around what the purpose is? So why is it taking place? What is the specific goal that we want to have? And what's the outcome of the meeting going to be? Then what's the process? So that will be, what is the list of items we're going to go through, as well as how long will the meeting be? Who's going to be involved? Where's the meeting going to take place? And then the payoff is the what's in it for the client. What is that ultimate outcome that we're looking to achieve? Not just overall, but specific to this meeting. What is the next steps that we are hoping to come out of the meeting that we've set up? So do you have buy-in and alignment from your client around the purpose of the meeting, the process you're going to go through, and the payoff that will be at the end result of it? So purpose, process, payoff, great way to establish context and be able to really make sure that you and the client are on the same page as you move forward in the meeting. Step 3, gaining agreement to participate. I often get some pushback from reps on this one because they're like, really? Why do I actually need the client's permission to move forward? And I don't see it that way. This is not about getting permission from the client to ask questions or to have a conversation. This is about gaining agreement on the context of the meeting, and also, again, locking arms with the client so they recognize that you guys are in this together, right? As I said earlier, sales is something we do with the client, not something we do to them. So gaining agreement is really important in terms of continuing to build rapport throughout the process, but making sure the client does feel like they have some skin in the game, that there is something that is going to be valuable for them, and they're agreeing to participate in this dialogue and discussion with you. So gaining agreement is really all about making sure you have, you've projected that you're not really there to pressure them. It's kind of my back to my, don't know if I can help you, but here's what we're here to explore. They don't need to feel obliged to buy from you as a result of this discussion. This is exploratory. This is about understanding more about their business, understanding more about potential value that you can bring to them, and hoping to get to a successful conclusion, but there's no obligation there. It's also about making sure that you are projecting your competence and the fact that you are going to bring current, accurate information to them, that you're not going to be wasting their time, and frankly, you're not going to be wasting your own as you go through this process. So gaining agreement, all of these steps are critical. Establishing context is critical. Gaining agreement is also critical. So don't think of this as asking permission. Think of this as making sure you are locked arms with the client and you're moving together, forward together in this process. All right, and then we're moving into step 4, the consultative investigation. This is my favorite part of the sales process because I am incredibly curious. I love learning more about my clients. I love learning more about prospects, about what their needs are, what their goals for their business are, how they are interpreting some of the industry trends that are impacting organizations like theirs. So this is where we can prep some really good solid questions and then continue to build on those questions as we ask and explore with the client. So within the consultative investigation approach, this is where you're demonstrating social evidence. So remember, this is a dialogue, right? It's not a monologue. So we're asking questions, but we're also infusing those questions with our capabilities, our some of the things that we've done that have been successful potentially. We're talking about social evidence. We're talking about perhaps some references or testimonials, but we're not doing a deep dive at this point into our solutions or capabilities. We're referencing some of those things in order to add credibility to our conversation, but the consultative investigation is all about the client that's in front of you. And we have to ask good questions in order to move forward in the process. Because if we don't understand their business, if we don't understand what's happening for them, then there is no way that we can recommend potential solutions. So consultative investigation, make sure you are going through this process so that you are asking good questions all around how the client's business is operating, what's important to them now, and my favorite question, why? Why is this important to you now? Their goals and objectives for their business, any problems, obstacles or gaps that are getting in the way of them getting to those goals. And then any priority, right? So we often, again, forget to ask that question. What's the priority? How can we understand what are the things that are most important for them to solve today? And then looking at what's the business impact of solving those problems? What are the consequences if those problems aren't solved by a certain date? And what are those dates? And what are some of the things that we can do to instill urgency, right? So I often use this expression when I'm teaching a class in person, but I call it poking the bruise, right? So this is all about making sure that we are really focused in on uncovering where the client has pain, right? So that's poking the bruise. They might feel that they've got a little bit of pain, but we've got to ask good questions to really shine a light on that pain. So they feel it. They feel the urgency and the need to solve that problem. And hopefully that's something that we can help with. But right now it's all about uncovering what that pain is, what that obstacle is, and what's getting in the way. Because what our goal is hopefully to help remove those obstacles so that they can get to success. But spend time here. Really understand what's going on for your client. I had a sales rep that I had worked with that gave me this recommendation, and it's something that has stuck with me throughout my career. And one of the things that he said was, before I even start talking about my solutions with a client, I always want to preface it with, based on what you shared with me, based on our conversation, based on what I've learned, based on what you said about your goals. So you're never talking about your stuff without first referencing how your stuff connects into what you learned during the consultative investigation. So critical. One, we need to uncover this information, and we definitely need the client to feel the pain of what's getting in the way of them meeting their goals. So there is some templates available for you. So in the handout section online, you can definitely download the consultative investigation questions template in the dashboard. It's a great tool, and it will give you a series of questions to help you to move forward in the consultative investigation process. So hopefully that will be helpful for everyone as you move forward in this. Okay, let's ask a question. Let's sort of pause here a bit, but really love to understand. And please feel free to write this in the chat section. What are some topics that you believe must be explored to truly understand the customer's business and to deliver genuine consultative value? So what topics in particular within your industry, within the clients that you work with, that you think are really critical to explore with your customers? So I'll just pause here and give you a moment to put that into the chat.
Okay, so someone has written in and they said, know the pain points of our customers. And Harry wrote in and said, firm workflow.
Okay, we're going to talk about that one in just a second in terms of workflow. I love that. Hang on to that one. Yeah, definitely. Pain points, I think, are critical. So understanding sort of what's getting in the way, being able to truly understand what's going on within their business is really key.
And Jimmy says, current and desired situations.
Yeah, so understanding where they are today, how their business works, and then making sure you kind of figuring out where do they want it to be, right? What is that ultimate goal going to look like for them? And really be mindful of when a client starts using words like more efficient, more effective, optimize the process. So those are great words, and we use them all the time in sales too, right? To really just to sort of highlight the value of our solutions, but really be mindful. Make sure you understand, what does the client actually mean by effective, efficient, optimized? Are you guys actually defining that the same way? So, that's where I really think it's important. Again, get curious. And when they are giving you that language back, double click on it, right? Like, don't just keep going forward. When they say something like, we really want to make this the most effective process possible. Great. What would effective look like for you? What would change within the current process? How is that going to change the role of the people who are involved in the process today? How are they going to use a new technology, a new system, a new piece of hardware, a new piece of equipment in a different way in order to get them to that end state or that desired state? So really, double click on those words because they could be different. Really great. Anything else, Kate, on the board?
Yeah, actually, just along those lines, we had Rick write in the last comment. They said listening and streamlining process for the client.
Yeah, listening is such a important skill for any sales professional. As you are going through the consultative investigation process, we got to listen, right? We have to listen to what the client's saying to us. We've got to pay attention to tone of voice, if we're in front of them, body language, all of those things, so that we can really pick up on what are those key things that are going to be most important for them.
And so Martello has written in and said, exploring the customer's business process and understanding who are the decision makers and influencers, just so that you know your customer.
Love that. You raised such a good point. So, we often think of who's buying our solutions. Well, at the end of the day, your client's organization isn't buying from you. It's the people within their business that are. So understanding who those stakeholders are, what's driving their objectives. So what are their objectives? What's driving their success? What do they care most about? Is really key. And we know that in most sales situations now, we tend to have multiple stakeholders that are involved in making that decision. So not only do we need to understand who those different stakeholders are, but we need to understand the dynamics that they have within that group, right, within each other, and how those decisions are actually going to be made. So that's critical as well. So that's a great point. Really focusing in on the people is key.
I think that's all we have for this one.
Well, I think you guys hit on most of them. So it is understanding what's their current situation, what's that desired state look like, what's the buying decision-making process that the client is going to go through, how long is that decision-making process, who's involved, back to the point that you made around stakeholders. What's the competitive situation? So what we mean by that is, are you up against anybody else? And again, what I've seen is often sales reps will shy away from this question. And this is one that I actually embrace. And I get really curious about this stuff. So if you've got, let's say, a prospect that has reached out to you that you've never worked with before, where they've got a long-standing relationship with your competitor, but they've called you, and I even had this situation with a sales rep that was telling me, oh, wow, and they even shared that they're very loyal to my competitor. And so I really need to make sure that I'm positioning the best possible price, the best possible solution. And so my first question was, why are they calling you? And the sales rep said to me, well, I don't know. I don't want to ask them that question. I'm like, absolutely, you want to ask them that question. So understand, who are you up against? If they've had a long relationship with your competitor, then I'd really love to understand, why are you calling me? What's not working right now, or what is it that you're looking to explore? Why would you need something different if it's working well for you today? So figure out, who are you up against? I think that's a really key part of this. And then definitely things around time, budget considerations. I know everybody loves asking the question, what's the budget? And for me, that one's a hit and miss. Sometimes you get an answer, sometimes you don't. Sometimes the client doesn't know. Sometimes they're waiting for you to define how much your stuff costs before they figure out what their budget is. For me, a potentially more effective question is, what is the budgeting process? How are things like this purchased, within the organization? So you understand who's involved. Will procurement be involved? Who else needs to sort of approve this as you move it forward? And if they have put in a similar project initiative, bought a similar service or product from you previously or from your competitors, what is sort of the parameters around that budget for the client, and what would that look like? And then timing certainly is, when does this have to be in place, is really key. And then we talked about stakeholders, understanding how they're working together, the politics, the dynamics of those stakeholders, and then specifically, what does success criteria look like, and what are their expectations when it comes to, once we've put something in place, what is then going to be expected, and what's the outcome that they're going to get out of using your stuff? And then leveraging something like the client objectives map to really make sure you're asking good questions around their business results, their targets, their measures, the issues that they're impacting. That's the poke and the bruise, right? The pain points, as well as their own needs and objectives, and looking at sort of what that future state is going to look like. And then I want to circle back to, the one thing that some of you wrote down is understanding their current workflow, understanding what their current process is such a good point. We often in sales ask lots of questions to sort of understand that, but can you actually see it in action? So I use this as an example, right? This is a great quote from Henry Ford. If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? So can you actually see the process in action? Can you walk the floor? Can you talk to the people who would be potentially using your stuff in a different way? Can we actually kind of see where the breakdowns might be? Can we spend a day in the life of? I had a rep that I was working with in the telecommunications sector, and they were actually selling into a nonprofit organization that was focused in on providing care for seniors. And now their focus had been on the key stakeholders within the opportunity, so the people making decisions around the new phone software, the new systems that they would be putting in place. So procurement, the head of IT, director of operations within this organization. But as we started working through the opportunity, they decided to take a little bit of a different approach. So they not only had conversations with those key stakeholders, but they asked if they could actually go into the senior centers where they would be implementing these new products and walk around, talk to staff, talk to residents, talk to visitors of residents, and try to figure out where the pain points are and actually see things in action. And as a result of doing that, they uncovered so much more information about what some of the issues were that they were able to take back then to the people making decisions and say, hey, this is what we've learned from your people. And here's an opportunity to actually make the process better, based on sort of that feedback. So walk the floor, spend a day in the life of, walk through the process, whiteboard it, map it out with your client. And really make sure you have a good understanding of how they are doing business today and how they want to do business in the future. Because your product and service is hopefully going to enable them to do something different, right? Do something better. So really understanding where they are and mapping it out is going to be a key part of that understanding and figuring it out as we go. Okay, so here, let's ask a poll question. Let's see how much you guys have retained on the steps we've gone through so far. So let's ask this question. What step are you in when you restate the objective for the meeting? And if you can select the appropriate response from the list below. So what step are you in when you restate the objective for the meeting?
I'll leave it open just a few more moments.
Okay.
Okay. Are you able to see those results, Carrie?
I can. I hope everybody can see them on the screen. Oh, and they just disappeared.
Oh, so we had 11% say greeting and building rapport, 42% said establish context, and 42% said gain agreement to participate, and we had 5% select consultative investigation.
All right. Well, for those of you who chose establishing context, you are right. That is where you are when you're restating the objective for the meeting. Although I understand the split with gaining agreement to participate, because honestly, those two steps really, even though you need to think about each one, but they often in the course of the discussion and dialogue seem to kind of come together. But it is really important to make sure you're restating the objective for the meeting, and then from there, gaining agreement to move forward in the dialogue or discussion. Yeah, great, everyone. Okay. So let's keep going through the steps. So we've built rapport, we've established context, we've gotten agreement from the client to move forward in the discussion and the dialogue. We've asked some phenomenal questions that have been insightful, that have truly helped us to understand the client's business, understand their goals, their objective, what the challenges are, and we've really had a good discussion and dialogue around that. Now we have to do something with the information that was shared with us. And step 5 is, it's helpful to sort of make sure you're summarizing what you've learned before you move to how do we solution for this. So that step 5, summarizing and prioritizing what you've learned, is really all about just, have we done a recap? Have we, sort of paraphrased and provided back to the client what it is that we've learned from them? And then ask them for, does that make sense? Is that accurate? Did I get that right? And then if you do have multiple things that they're working on, what is the priority for all of the issues that you've discussed? What are the things that you really want to focus on first, so that you can make sure that you are aligned with the client in terms of what those priorities may be, and making sure that you're really focused on how to move that forward. And is there any risks of any additional issues that maybe you haven't discussed that you want to make sure are brought up at this point? So summarizing, prioritizing, this can be done very simply depending on the conversation, or it can be more complex based on the level of dialogue and discussion. But it's really important to make sure you are doing this before you get into exploring your solutions. What I have seen happen in meetings is we may paraphrase, the client hears back what you've just shared with them, and they go, huh, never heard it that way before. Actually, I think it may be this issue. Even though we've been talking about, I really need to optimize the process for my current team and really make sure it's a cost-saving initiative. But after sharing, and exploring and talking about it and hearing it back from what you shared, it actually isn't about cost savings. It's how are we going to drive more revenue through this current process, right? So it's also going to help you to figure out how you're going to measure success as you continue to talk to the client and what that's going to look like from a quantification perspective. So step 5 is all about summarizing and prioritizing what you've learned. And then that leads you into step 6, which is exploring solutions. So this is where you can start to talk about what is it that you do well? What products and services are going to fit with what the client has shared with you? Remember, you're focusing on the customer's business. You're not doing a product dump, but you're really talking and using the language that we had talked about earlier, where it's, from what you've told me, here's what I think may be a good fit for you. From what you've shared, here may be the appropriate service or solution that's going to meet your needs. And you're making sure to make those connections between your capabilities and what the clients shared with you, whether that is through what you've learned as you've asked questions around their client objectives, or what you've learned around their pain points, and you're continuing to demonstrate what you do that's unique and how you can drive business value for them in this conversation. Now, all of these steps put together should be a dialogue and should be a collaboration. So as much as we are sort of laying these out in a very linear order, I fully recognize and understand that as you start to explore solutions, things may come up where the client may share something more with you and you like, oh, wow, I need to ask a question about that. So you might kind of take a couple steps back and then summarize what you just learned and then go back to exploring solutions with them. You may need to talk about a specific case example of where you were successful in a similar organization of theirs in order to then establish credibility enough to ask questions. So I get where there may be a little bit of sort of back and forth between consultative investigations, summarizing and prioritizing, and exploring solutions. Just be really mindful, though, that we are not skipping steps 4 and 5 in an effort or in a, because we are so focused in on selling our stuff. And we are so focused in on making sure the client hears all of the great things that we do. You do not have to share everything that you do. You don't have to go through every feature and benefit. In fact, I'd highly advocate that you don't. Instead, focus on the features and benefits that are the most important based on what you've learned through your consultative investigation. Because at the end of the day, the client does not care what your stuff does. Your client does not care about your great service, your capability, your product. What they care about is what that product, service, or capability is going to do for them. And that should be our focus as we explore solutions. So just really, really mindful. At this point, it's, you're definitely talking about what you do and how you do it, but always connect that back into what the client shared with you and talk about what's most valuable for them. This is not a features and benefits dump. It is truly about exploring solutions that fit with what your client is trying to accomplish. And then step 7 is all about taking that exploration even further by being able to focus in on what is the outcome the client is going to expect from leveraging your solutions. And that outcome, if you can, should be quantified, right? So what are the benefits? What's the payback? What's the ROI? How are you going to help them save money? How are you going to help them increase sales? How are you going to help them save time, increase efficiency, output, quality, improve customer satisfaction, improve employee satisfaction? And get to a point, if you can, in the conversation of really determining how will that be quantified? How are you going to measure that impact? So that when something is implemented, you can actually go back to what it is that you shared and actually say, did this actually happen? Did we save you the X amount of money that we had promised? Did we enable you to increase sales by the 25% in this one area that we had promised? Did we help your team save the 5 hours by implementing this new software solution instead of going through a manual process? So quantification absolutely helps to just take that collaborative, consultative approach that you have with the client to that next level, that full-on next step. And then it helps you to actually prove the value once you've implemented the solution for sure. So remember, sales reps who do this well are usually about 5 times more successful at closing the deal when they can actually get to a quantification of benefits and when they talk about the ROI impact. When you can actually get specific and granular on some of these measures, you are going to be much more successful because the client is going to see this in action in their environment, right? It's not just empty promises. It really is something that's going to help them to drive their business in a way that they care the most about. And then once you've gone through these steps, really think about how are you presenting this back to the client? Are you creating some type of business case where you can document what you've learned from the client, their background, the objectives that they have with this particular initiative or project, what you're proposing as a solution, the expected benefits, the quantification of those benefits, and then the next steps, the action to move this initiative forward. It can be as formal as this. It may be, as a follow-up to the meeting, you're sending an email that has sort of each of these kind of components outlined. But think about what works best for you and for your client base. But it is often helpful to document what you learned and really be able to define sort of what that solution is and next steps that are associated with it. So for me, for my business, it's really important for me to do this, and I'll do this in formal business cases that I then send to the client. Often, I don't just send it, I actually bring it with me to a meeting and walk through it with them so that we can go through each of the areas step by step. But if you have to send it as a follow-up to the meeting, based on sort of what those expectations are from the client, by all means. But just really think about how are you documenting what you've learned and being able to then position kind of what those next steps are. And then step 8, we've come to step 8, which is really all about, do we have a go forward commitment? And so whatever that go forward commitment is following your meeting. So is there another meeting that we're going to set up with maybe some additional stakeholders? Is this then leading into doing some type of demonstration or proof of concept with the client? Do we need to have them come in and do a visit with our organization? Is there samples that we need to drop off? Is there other meetings that need to happen, or is it a formal proposal as an outcome? So make sure you and the client are in agreement with what is that next step, and make sure that you don't just have actions following this meeting, but the client has actions or takeaways as well. So if you are looking to set up a follow-up meeting with other decision makers, you may be bringing people in from your organization. How is the client then bringing in, or the prospect or the stakeholder that you've met with, how are they going to bring in their people from their side? And who's going to build the agenda? Is that something you guys are doing together with the client? So if you're helping the client to solve a problem, they should have as much stake in this as you do, and really make sure that they've got some actions assigned to them. And then once the meeting's over, what are some of the ways that we can actually assess the effectiveness of the meeting? And this may be about asking for feedback. So you've had clients or colleagues come with you to the meeting. Can you actually get feedback from them? Can you actually ask the client or any other attendee that was in the meeting, how did this go? Did we get to the outcome that you're looking for? Is there other ways that we could have, gotten to sort of this better, or focused on sort of a different outcome? But even without that feedback, either from the client, from any other attendees, or from other colleagues that you might have brought with you, make sure you do some self-assessment. Every time you leave a meeting, take a moment. So you have to build this into your calendar, right? So you got to give yourself a few minutes, whether that is going into a coffee shop, if it's a face-to-face meeting, hanging up the phone and giving yourself a few minutes, on your own before you move on to the next call, or even if it's in your car, right? Jotting down a couple of notes. Really just want you to focus on what went well, what could you improve on, and what would you do differently next time, right? So you're really making sure you're building in some of that self-assessing kind of skill into everything that you do, because there's always opportunity to improve, and there's always opportunity to learn from things that went really well. And I have to tell you, I've definitely learned from meetings that have gone very badly about what not to do. But this has been also helpful when we've had effective client meetings to really be able to capture, wow, this really seemed to work well with this client. I wonder if this will work well for others. So it's something you continue to test out. So make sure you are assessing your own effectiveness. Ask others if you can, but definitely, do go through that self-assessment yourself each and every time you're in front of the client. So let's take a pause. Oh gosh, sorry about that. That was strange. Let's go back. Wow, okay, that was interesting. Let's go back to poll question. So based on everything you've learned about the 8 steps, what step are you in when you explain solutions? And we'll put that up on the poll for everybody. So please respond to that. So based on everything that you've just learned, what is the step you're in when you are explaining your solutions?
And we'll give that a few more moments.
Okay.
Okay.
All
So we
right,
had
we see the results there.
6% say
Yes.
summarize, prioritize, and 6% say secure go forward commitment. And then we had an even split at 44% each with explore solutions and quantify benefits and ROI impact.
Well, and again, I'm loving the splits because I totally understand where you're coming from. The answer is quantify benefits and ROI impact is correct. So it is when we start to really explain how our solutions will benefit the client and the impact that it's going to have on their business. But as you explore solutions, again, you're going to be doing that a little bit back and forth, right? Where you're going to be talking about, what potentially could be put in place and then the benefit of that. So I'll take those results, Kate, any day. So you guys got it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And in terms of additional support and tools that can help you, so in the handout section, you can definitely download the consultative process tool. It will help you to kind of set up and plan for each of the 8 steps as you're going through the consultative selling approach with your clients. So incredible tool. Please make sure you guys download that. It really will be helpful for you to prep and plan your time in front of the customer. Because remember, we don't want to waste their time, but I also don't want you to waste your time either. So having tools like this to help you think through your approach is really helpful. Any other questions, comments on the 8 steps process that we can highlight? We'll just give you a moment. If you do have a question, please feel free to put that into the chat.
We did have an individual when you were explaining step 7 say spot on. So that's really nice feedback.
Oh, wonderful. Well, and I hope for all of you on the phone, I hope my enthusiasm and my passion for consultative selling kind of comes through loud and clear. Because as I said, for me, this is the heart of everything I teach. And I truly believe in the importance of understanding your client. Because that is what's going to drive success. When we do this well, it's amazing how success really just opens up for us, and it takes our approach to a whole new level. It really does. And I'll share one story just as you guys are potentially asking any questions. But I remember very early on, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but there's quite a few years ago when I first started in my sales career. I had a very large company that was one of my clients out of the gate. And I know I was very intimidated by meeting with this organization because they were, international, well-known, lots of stakeholders, and it was intimidating going into meetings, especially because the person I was meeting with had been in the company for, over 30 years, knew her stuff, was really driven. So when I think of personality styles, man, she was a driver. So when I first started, working in my career in sales at this job, I really didn't even know that much about what my company did, the services or the products that we sold. So I went into meetings with this driver asking tons of questions because I didn't know what else to talk about. So I'd ask her questions about her business and what was going on and what her team was working on. And then over the course of a couple of months, I got more familiar with our services. So I started going in and doing more product pitching because that's what I thought I had to do. Right? Hey, here's a new solution that we have thought of, or hey, have you thought of buying this, or hey, this might be something for you. And I remember walking out of, or trying to walk out of a meeting about 3 months in, one that I've been product pitching to. And this is back in the day, guys. So this was before PowerPoint. So I had all my nice product sheets, laid out, and I had stuff on, oh, now I'm really dating myself, like the acetate things, if you guys remember those from school, where you'd have overhead projectors. So all of that was part of this process. And I remember her stopping me at the door. Everyone else was able to leave, and she held me back and said, Carrie, I need to give you some advice. I said, okay, a little nervous, a little intimidated. What's going on? You got to stop talking about what you do because we don't care. All I care about is what your products are going to do for me. I liked you much better when you asked me questions. So stop just giving me what you do. And that stuck with me throughout my sales career. One, it was incredibly tough to go through. And she, used even harsher language, basically telling me, hey, you got to stop, with this. You got to do something a little bit better because this isn't working. So that stuck with me, and it really changed my sales approach. And it made me really focus in on, how do I truly be consultative? How do I ask good questions? How do I stop product pitching? I can believe in my products, I can believe in my services, but I don't need to lead with them. I can lead with what's important to the client. And that really did stick with me throughout my career, and that's really what I based my career on. So it was a pivotal moment for me. So I shared that with you all because I really do believe that in order to achieve phenomenal amounts of sales success, it is about focusing on the client. Sorry, Kate, any other questions to?
We did have a question come in, but before that, I will say that a really lot of good feedback. The handouts were very helpful, superb presentation, and a nice and short and sweet presentation, lunchtime reminder of best practices in selling, and a comment that it was very much the Mike Weinberg way.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's
And Jimmy wrote in and said, what are some good poke the bruise questions?
Oh, great. That's a great question. So there is a handout that's in your deck where you can pull on some what are those questions and some sample questions. For me, the good poke the bruise questions are really in those three categories. I think that we talked about initially is, what's their current state? What are they doing today? What's the workflow? What's the process? What are their people having to do? Then understanding what's the desired state, where do they want it to be, what are their objectives, their goals, and then the gap is the pain point, right? The gap is what the heck is getting in the way, and really exploring those gaps, those roadblocks. What are the consequences if you don't solve this issue by this specific date? What is that going to do to your ability to provide services or products to your clients? What is that going to do to your ability to have the team work, in the best way they possibly can? So what are they doing today? What do they want it to be? And then the gap is the pain. So really sit in the gap a little bit, right? And really focus in on the consequences of what they currently have in place and what's getting in the way of them getting to their goals and objectives. Great question.
Peter wrote in a really great question. They said, consultative selling takes a fair amount of time and agreement from the client side. What are ways early on to warrant the time investment from the client's perspective?
Oh, that's wonderful. I think part of how you determine which clients to take this through, to sort of go through the consultative process is in the prep and the pre-work that you do. So part of that prep isn't just to find out more about their industry and their business. It's also to determine whether or not this prospect is going to be a good fit for you and your business. Part of going through this process is to continue to learn that at each of the stages of the consultative selling approach and being able to understand when and where there may not be a good fit. At the end of the day, if you're going to lose the deal, I actually want you to lose early. So by asking good questions, by doing research ahead of time, that can help you to lose early so that you don't spend time spinning wheels and solutioning with a prospect that's never going to buy from you.
That's great.
Great question.
That's all the questions we have for today.
Okay, well, and that again brings us up to the top of the hour as well, but I just want to thank everybody for being on the call. Remember, this session does help you to gain credits towards your certification. So whatever path you're on, I wish you all the best with that in your, your sales learning journey. And part of being on calls like this is the commitment to learning. And, as much as we want to learn about our clients, we also want to ensure you're investing in yourself. And so again, I really appreciate that you're all on the call today and hope you all have phenomenal levels of success as you move forward. So go sell.
Carrie, on behalf of the CPSA, thank you so much. And of course, our audience for attending. If you would like a recording of the webinar, it will be available in the CPSA Learning Hub. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me at salessuccess@cpsa.com.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you all so much. Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
Bye.